Next, we're going to get to some oscillators available on the Arturia MiniFreak that were not available on the MicroFreak. They were made by Noise Engineering, and the first one is called Bass. What Bass does is it takes a sine wave and then a cosine wave, which is a sine wave that is shifted so that basically it's out of phase with the other sine wave to a degree where the point at which the first sine wave would be at its 0 point, this will be at its maximum point. Anyway, suffice it to say you have these two different types of sine waves that are sort of overlapped, and that's what's going to give us the bass sound. Okay, let's see here. Have everything on 0. It's not quite a sine wave, but it is deep and low like you would want, say, an electric bass to be. Which sounds great even on its own. The first setting, which is wave, is a saturation, where a saturation, an overdrive, is introduced to the cosine wave, which affects the sine wave. You can already hear, basically when you saturate something, you're distorting it, you're adding harmonics to it. So we're getting out of vaguely sine-ish territory and into something a little grittier. We're not even 50%, and we're already getting pretty cool. And you'll notice something here. Each time I press a note, I am getting a different timbre, which is kind of more like an acoustic instrument, which gives this more of a true bass character. And it makes your music more interesting, too, if every time you hit a note, it isn't the same waveform. Let's keep moving up with this. Anyway, we eventually get to this, which has a nice low-end component, but also a high-end component, so you're actually hearing the timbre of the bass instead of just the frequency of the bass. I should tell you that this is also polyphonic. So you can actually play it up in, like a more typical, like in a treble range. And adjusting this first setting, the saturation, can give you filter effects. Modulating it, I should say, instead of adjusting it. I am adjusting it, but if you add modulation to it. But we'll take it back down into the bass range. Anyway, so our next controller taking place in the timbre knob is fold, because this also has a wave folder. And if you'll remember from when we covered the wave folder, a wave folder basically takes the top part of a sine wave and folds it over, creating a new wave shape with more harmonics. And like I said a few moments ago, you can use this in the treble range. And when you do, this is a bass sound, so there's a heavy bass component. It gives it more beef. And that helps with some of the sounds on the MiniFreak, which can be kind of digital and light. This will give you a little more low end in your typical treble sounds. Anyway, that's the wave folder. And you can use the wave folder and the saturation together. some really cool timbres there. And then lastly, we have noise, which adds grit. There's something happening where this noise is going between the two, the sine and the cosine. I'm not sure how that works, but basically it affects the timbre of the waveforms and adds noise overall. So you can hear the variations now in the bass frequency. Giving it more character. So let's turn up some of the saturation. So if you have less saturation, you can really hear the extra noise that exists. If you just want the modulation of the tone and not the extra noise, remember you do have an analog filter. It's a pretty cool sound. So yeah, you can definitely hear how that noise is affecting the timbre of this, the tone of this bass. You can make some really nice, warm, big, fat, even messy bass sounds with this. It really is, it's a useful means to getting a decent bass sound here on the MiniFreak. And also keep in mind that if you use it, like you could use it with another oscillator doing some really bright, wild, tinny digital sound, and then you could have this tuned octaves up as something underlying to give a little beef to the digital sound that you're using elsewhere. Granted, this is a digital sound too, but as you heard, it is pretty round and big and warm. So that is the noise engineering bass oscillator found on the Arturia MiniFreak.